People have mental health troubles. Sometimes they turn to drugs to help them. Sometimes they turn to counseling. Both those things surely have their place. But what Schiller shows is that at a basic level, what we really need for psychological health is art. In our experience, we're drawn in two conflicting directions. On the one hand, there's letting ourselves go and being drawn along by feelings. Or, on the other hand, there's controlling things and regulating how our life unfolds. And those two different attitudes play a pretty big role. On the one hand, being happy has a lot to do with being able to roll along and enjoy things. But being good has a lot to do with regulating and planning things. But Schiller says there are really two fundamental drives recognizable in our experience, what he calls the sense drive, which is the orientation toward feeling, and what he calls the form drive, which is the orientation toward law. And the fact is, both of those things have to be there. If we live a life where all we care about is our feelings and we ignore order and law, reason, form, he says that makes us savage. We're just wild. On the other hand, if we're just committed to law and order and we make no place for feeling, well, then he says we're barbarian, or, in the 20th century, we'd probably say fascistic. But these are real things that happen in people. We tend to develop in ourselves one or the other of these things to a much higher degree. We tend one-sidedly to favor this kind of living at the expense of that other one. And that's how we make ourselves fundamentally unhappy. We're really, in a basic way, fighting against our own healthy development and healthy needs. So what we really need is to get those things in harmony. And the truth is, each of them flourishes through what the other has to offer. So what we really need to do is to learn how to, realize the orders and principles and laws that we care about insofar as we're intelligent and form-driven. We need to learn how to realize those through the life of feeling and enjoyment and so on. And on the other hand, we need to learn how to feel and enjoy and roll with things in a way that is true to and answers to the demands of the rules that we can recognize we should live by. That experience of realizing your principles through the specificities of the complex, diverse, empirical world of feelings and so on, that's what he says is really freedom. And that freedom that we really need to develop as the character of ourselves, that's got to be sort of our inner nature, is precisely what we see externally in beauty. In beauty, you see a material specificity that is pretty much the perfect presentation of form, of meaning. Beautiful things put on display precisely that reconciliation of sensory specificity and meaningful form. They show how meaning and form can be alive in the multiplicity of sense. So in beauty, what we're actually always seeing modeled is freedom. And that's what we actually experience when we experience something as beautiful. We're recognizing it as free. In a way, we're recognizing it as a kind of mirror of ourselves. And for that reason, beauty, art, can have a therapeutic effect. Art becomes a kind of mirror for us, showing us how our commitment to the sensual, to feeling, can itself be a site for the experience of form. And it shows us how our commitment to form can be a compelling immersion in specificity. And we actually encounter that. When you listen to music, it can actually make you feel excited about going out and dancing or whatever. This very orderly, systematic presentation of a kind of coherent meaning gets you fired up about the sensory. And on the other hand, let's say sculpture, in the encounter of, beautifully carved marble or, architecture, beautiful spaces, can actually inspire in you an interest in form, of, feeling kind of oriented towards the beauty of geometry, intellectual pursuits, and so on. So the encounter with art is in a way educative. It in fact shows us how to be committed to those sides of experience that we might otherwise be neglecting. But even more than that level of personal impact, artistic culture is doing something like that at the level of a society as a whole. And that's really, I think, what Schiller especially wants to get at, right? How the different arts and the different ways a society cultivates the arts is, in fact, the way that society is opening up a path for how people are going to be able to realize their freedom. It's the way a society actually puts on display for itself and for its members how to be free, how to live. And for that reason, the aesthetic dimension, the artistic dimension of society is one of the very most important for shaping how people develop and determining what real possibilities for freedom there are in that society.